playground for their related warfare. I'd like to
some of the guys were getting into security spaces, but we've had a chat to the head of security here. They said that, sorry, that's misinformation, so we're happy.
But Judge Blocher is cautioning against a major overhaul. He feels the court has been a victim of its own success.
They haven't done that, have they? Yeah, so that's fine. So, don't know what to try.
We're happy, we're going to look into it.
You realise your happiness has got no concern about, eh? Your happiness has got no concern about.
Just don't use my children in Operation Phantom.
Just so long as you act lawful, we will. Bye now. Enjoy your day. Donuts. $3 for a pack of 12.
At the moment, all narrative
So the police have just come and told us that they're happy. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad that the New Zealand police are happy that we're here. Your job is on a limited time. So how did calling the police work out for you? Are we still here? It looks like we are. Brooker versus New Zealand Police 2005. You might want to look it up.
We are the revolution. We want it all tonight. We want to take back what's rightfully ours. We are
the Good morning, one and all. This is from the Fringes, a program about alternative provocative views. My name is Jack Geelan. We also include family issues, and my guest today is Steve. How are you, Steve? Steve Evans.
Good, thanks.
And a reporter from the United Nations spoke of human rights housing crisis here in New Zealand. Have you heard about that one?
Yeah, I knew they were coming.
What do you reckon should be done about that?
Well,
or state homes? And
well, Paula Bennett says there is no housing crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, there definitely is one.
Yep. Okay, National Party killed off a report into child abuse. Will I have to start the Justice Party to get real justice during this coming elections? I mean, you've spoken, Steve, about the fact that the parliamentarians of different parties aren't really listening to our issues.
Oh, well, clearly not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're now having to go overseas to file in the United Nations because we can't get the legal system here in New Zealand to be lawful.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, even the Minister of Justice has said that the legal system is broken.
Yep. Now, a former commissioner is accusing the government of killing off critical report on the way it handled hundreds of cases of children abused in state care. So it seems as though they've been lax on the job of defending New Zealanders here in this country.
Totally. And our rights are being taken away, and I think that is with regards to the Lake Alice investigation, which, you know, has been covered up for 30 years by both of the parties, National and Labour.
Yep.
Helen Clark did it, National did it, and Tolly even wrote that these people were making it up, that they were electrified on their genitals, which has turned out that New Zealand has been convicted of torture of children.
Yeah.
And it's disgraceful.
Now, Mark has written something here on the Official Information Act. Please supply, under Official Information Act 1982, the following information. How many children have been uplifted by Oranga Tamariki, be it ex parte or uplifts or otherwise, from 2009 to 2019? We are basically saying, have we got accurate statistics on how many children are uplifted daily, how many a week? And it seems as though they're fudging the issues here, Steve.
Well, the reality is, I think that that has been requested so that we can compare ourselves with another world-class, allegedly, country called Norway, which is violating human rights just as is going on in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And these violations are causing a lot of pain and heartache and death to many families in New Zealand.
Yeah. Now, secondly, he's got here, what ethnicities do the above yearly totals consist of? How much public money is being spent on legal costs uplifting children? Given recent finding by UN against the New Zealand torture of children in relation to Lake Alice patients, is OT concerned about the numerous breaches against children and parents in relationship to Article 17 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights? Article 17, which basically talks about the protection of the biological family being paramount, and also Article 8, the right to respect for one's private and family life. What would you like to say about that?
Well, there's a lot of things there, Jack, but let's just stick with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
Yep.
Now, you can quite easily go to the website justice.government.nz. So this piece of information is available in common domain for the public. And one of the things that it states is the core, well, firstly it goes on about the Universal Declaration on Human Rights.
Yep.
And then it goes on to talk about the core human rights instruments, which is these civil and political rights, which are being abused by the legal process, by state organisations and by the state generally.
Yeah.
And the issue there is that they have not been ratified under law.
Yeah.
Right? But if you look at these declarations, it says, in addition to international treaties, the United Nations has adopted a wide range of resolutions and declarations.
Yes.
Right? Although they are not binding in the same way as treaties, these instruments establish standards of behaviour and practice with which states are expected to comply. So even though they're not ratified, the state is expected to comply. And they're not, because they're not respecting the right to families.
Yep.
They're abusing us in the family court.
Yep.
And they are, I mean, we've had a report and I would argue this all day, we've had a report by the Family Court Reform group, and they've come back and said that the family court is not fit for the purpose. But the other problem we've got is we've got the issues of clowns, both in red and blue.
Yeah.
Finlayson was one and Little was another, that have rubber stamped the bill administration of justice, where we can't criticise the performance of judges.
Wow.
Now,
and you've also got
just but one of the big problems there, Jack, is that these people are paid for by our taxpayers' money.
Right.
They are abusing us with our income. And this is just rubbish because they're not following the law.
Taxes should go into helping families.
Correct. And when you look at what the international expert for human rights, Marius Rickarus, when he came out here, he said that he would look at New Zealand and listen to us, and he would decide on himself, so no influence from us, he would decide whether he would put in a complaint to the United Nations, because although he's an expert in the European Court, he also does have work in the United Nations. Right. And as you know, one of the things we worked with, and I think we've been successful here as Families for Justice, is he has filed a complaint in the United Nations about the breaches that are going on within the family court.
In New Zealand, because you mentioned before the complaint has been put in by an expert, Marius Rickarus, to the UN.
That's right.
So is that being done currently?
That's been submitted, and Andrew Little's got a copy. And You know, Andrew Little actually said that the law in New Zealand is not following human rights. But what has he done?
Yeah.
And if we look at some of those rights, one of them is to a family life. Yeah. And if you actually look further at some of these expert courts around the world, like the European Court, which relate and transfer across to the United Nations, they talk about the bond with a family for a child being very important. And that even foster care is seen as a temporary measure until they can re-establish the bond with the parent. But some of the carry-on that's going on within those evil people at Oranga Tamariki and totally lawless is they are not developing the bond. I can think of a number of parents that there was no allegation of violence against the children.
Yeah.
And we recently, I actually think in the complaint, Marius uses or gives an example of a married gentleman we know down in Paraparaumu that has not seen his children for 4 years.
Wow.
And there is no allegation of violence against the children. No, so how is that aiding and supporting the biological bond?
Yeah. So it's all smoke and mirrors. There's no open, honest transparency. The secret family court. How do we keep them accountable? And we're saying we're going to the UN. And I remember we did this with Kerry and the men's group. We went to the Commissioner of Human Rights and he was talking about class action. And when you talk to Winston Peters, he's also telling us we can't do anything about it.
Well, that's rubbish.
I mean, who's answerable to who? Who's accountable, you know?
I mean, honestly, our politicians are a pack of muppets.
Yep.
Honestly, they're getting bullied by Crown law into doing exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Right? Crown law need to be dealt to by the most senior government, including the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Because we've seen the example in the Lake Alice case.
Yes.
They have covered that up and tried to stop these people getting justice for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And the reality is that the Crown law, which is funded by our taxpayers' money, should be there to promote justice, not to win against us at all costs.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. These children were violated with electrical current on their genitals.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah. And the government's getting away with it. They're not.
Well, they all covered it up.
Yeah.
I mean, how many governments have been there since those original complaints were placed with Lake Alice? And Lake Alice, in my opinion, when the investigation properly happens, is just the tip of the iceberg. It would seem to me that, you know, that some of the injustice that goes on centres around the family court, because the family court is the mental court.
Yeah,
and
elite.
And these children ended up in Lake Alice, which was a mental institution, because of the court. And it's a secret court, as you said, Jack. So there's no transparency whatsoever.
Yeah. And of course, uplift should be a temporary measure and the biological family should be respected. And you mentioned 7AA, they should place babies with the extended family. What evidence do we have that they're actually doing this? Is OT investigating their own processes to ensure that they're doing this properly? Or are they just uplifting babies and trafficking in children?
Well, Jack,
what's really
I can think of a number of cases where the children have not been given to their extended family.
Yeah.
I can think of a number of cases. In fact, I can think of one where we went to a minister, Mr. Mark Mitchell of the National Party, and those grandchildren have still not been returned to their whānau.
Yeah.
In fact, I can tell you that in that particular case, the grandmother has seen those children 3 times in a year.
Yep.
And how is that protecting the biological bond?
Well, it isn't, because you talk to a lot of these mothers and they're not getting access to their own children.
And there's no discussion there of violence with the grandmother.
Right.
I mean, we know the grandmother, as you know, and she seems a very pleasant woman. She seems a very gentle soul, and she's distraught and traumatised by the inability to have a biological connection with the children, and the children, it seemed, wanted to have one as well.
So it seems to me it's split, divide and conquer. You've got a secret family court, you've got Oranga Tamariki, a law unto themselves, you've got parliamentarians who are not interested, they love the abduction of children, and you've got a situation with the Treaty of Waitangi where we are endeavouring to work in with the Maori people, because, I mean, a lot of the uplifts occur with the Maoris, and we want to include everyone. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. How do you proceed ahead when you're trying to represent everyone with what's really going on, and having a concerted effort where a consensus of agreement between all of us, Maori and non-Maori, where we can all work together and as one, where you've got all these groups in this country, and Families for Justice is trying to represent everyone, and we're trying to take it to an international human rights court, aren't we?
Well, it's the philosophy of Families for Justice that we are non-gender, non-religious, non-race.
Yeah.
But we do acknowledge and support the fact that Maori are the highest group, I think they're 56% of the children that are taken.
Right.
And that, considering the size of them as a part of our population, is huge.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a social services degree at the Wananga and a mana corridor course, the 2-year course. So I, in my own heart, I see myself as a Pākehā with a Maori heart. And I try to understand the Maori people, and we need them. We need to work in together, don't we, for the future?
Well, you know, one of the victims of Lake Alice, Paul, who was, and Malcolm, they're both European people.
Yeah.
Right? They were the people that doggedly, selflessly championed the requirement for justice for all. And 80% of those victims in Lake Alice were Maori.
Yeah.
You know?
And the big percentage that are in prisons also.
Well, that's even crazier.
Yeah.
The reality is that we have to work together because the state wants to divide us. We can't win against the state unless we work together.
Right.
That's just my opinion. And I know me, I'm not going to give up. I think we've now got a champion in someone like Paul and CCHR, who we awarded New Zealand Human Rights Defenders of the Year for their work that they doggedly conducted with both Victor and Steve Green and Mike Ferris to, without stopping, over a very, very long period of time, file in the United Nations and win.
Okay. Okay, we have received no help from the government. We need to go to the UN. We need to unite and fight. And it's obvious with the contravention of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states Article 17, protect the biological family, and also Article 8, the right to respect for one's own private and family life. How do we proceed from here? Where do we go to with all the groups around the country and the Families for Justice? And we've got an umbrella now whereby we're also representing people right around the world, not only our own people, Steve. So where do we go from here?
Well, I do think that we're trying to work with other groups. My personal opinion is I don't care what brand you come under, as long as you come. It's not about Families for Justice, it's about the kids and the parents. And I have always supported United because I believe that they are grassroots people.
Yep.
And they've definitely been denied their rights under the law, but they've also been denied many of their financial rights. And I just believe that we're absolutely wasting our time and energy because of the motivation of the professionals and the judicial elite, which include the law society, because they are only motivated by making money from this, that we have to go outside the jurisdiction of New Zealand, which means we have to end up in the United Nations. And at least in the United Nations, and they would look at the European courts as well, they say that the family should be protected. It shouldn't be abused by the child protection systems, which are just disgraceful. State organisations abusing children, killing children, and you know, one of the examples that really infuriates me, I have not attacked Jacinda Ardern. But when I saw her on the TV the other day, justifying and blaming just the family for the death in Flaxmere, which you know, they are the culprit, there is no doubt. But people forgot, and it wasn't acknowledged by the Prime Minister, that Oranga Tamariki returned their child. And I spoke to Mr. Ratner, who I've got a lot of time for, and he came out and said, why has no one looked at Oranga Tamariki and the procedures that they looked at and made sure that the whānau were not strong enough around that child to protect him? Now, something seriously gone wrong.
And this happens all the time with Oranga Tamariki.
That's right.
And this is not just an isolated incident.
I can think of cases left, right and centre where children have been returned from Oranga Tamariki's care in state care in coffins. Now there's a number of cases we know about. It's disgraceful.
And there's no independent complaints authority.
Well, listen, the chief executive, OT, Chief Executive Review Panel, does not operate on the rules of natural justice. It's a cover-up organisation. And Moss is really good at it. Yes, Grenier, I have my executive review, and it is a joke that you're covering up Operation Phantom, which we've discovered is still continuing. And I know that what it should be is independent, and it should be put in the Child Commissioner's office. The Executive Review Committee should be in the Children's Commissioner's office, and it should be taken away from Oranga Tamariki, because even the report that Howard Broad wrote said that it was a hopeless complaint system. It's a lawless complaint system. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I was blown away watching that reporter on TV saying that we have a human rights housing crisis in New Zealand. It's a no-brainer. We know about that. We know there's not enough houses going in, so they're just looking for excuses, basically. And then you've got the National Party killed off a report into child abuse.
Well, before you go on there, Jack, the point is this, and, you know, like, there are parties in New Zealand that want to stop immigration. Right? Well, in the last 10 years, New Zealand has allowed more than 1 million immigrants to come into New Zealand.
That's right.
You know, some immigration is very good for a country. But when you change the population of a group by at least 25%, that's a massive change. It's more than 25%. But the problem is, did the government allow for the infrastructure? No. Clearly not. We're building roads left, right and centre. Go and have a drive around Auckland. It's become a toxic city to live in. I don't want to live there anymore, and I'm an Aucklander. It's a really toxic place to live. And people are stressed out, A lot of the immigrants are used to living in big cities because they've lived overseas, but you know, I mean, most people I know would like to get out of Auckland if it was at all possible.
Yeah.
And real New Zealand is now no longer in Auckland.
Now we find that Mark's letter to the Official Information Act, supply under the Official Information Act, how many children uplifted, how much public money spent on legal costs, and is Oranga Tamariki concerned about the numerous breaches of human rights? So there's no accountability to their structure. This is what we're bringing out.
And there's no accountability to the law.
Yeah. And so you have to start your own justice party for freedom, justice and equality. Now, Families for Justice have an alliance with the Commission of Citizens for Human Rights, as well as international human rights lawyers. You mentioned something about the Labour Wellness Package. Are they going to put that together soon on behalf of the family? They're not. They're not being honest about it, are they?
I don't know. I don't know the answers to that.
Yeah. So we have a complaint being put in by the expert Marius Ruckerus to the UN. So that's wonderful that he's going to be doing that.
Well, I think that what's going to happen there, Jack, is that there's a number of groups around New Zealand that must start putting in complaints to the UN.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that the only people that the politicians listen to is the UN. And I'm not saying that the UN is the saviour either, because, you know, they've done some pretty crazy things around the globe.
Yep. Okay, so we've got 20 seconds. The uplifts should be temporary and the biological family should be respected. In 7AA, they should place babies with extended family. Okay, this is from the Fringes for another week. Let's all be transformational people and change the system and work together. Bye-bye.
Excuse me, One News, could you just tell me why you won't go to human rights stories, just so we can understand? Is it possible at all?
Sorry?
Is it possible at all for you to tell me why you won't come to human rights?
I haven't been told not to.
Okay, but why won't you? But when I ring, I often ask and you say you won't do it because that's civil.
I don't.
Okay, so what's your name, Sue? Could I ask you then?
No. If you call the newsroom.
I have many times, and they say they don't do humans. They don't. Yeah, I do watch my back with your government and the news, but they've told us that they won't do human rights stories.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But you said you would, so could I speak to you?
No, I'm the cameraman.
Okay, have you got a card, Matt Smith?
No, I haven't, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have rung them. I'm an advocate. We're a registered protesting group.
And it's all important stuff too.
But they won't respond, sir.
Yeah, cool. So
It's not cool.